They called him the coldest man alive, ruthless, calculating, incapable of compassion. When Richard Hale walked into a room, hearts froze before the air conditioner did. He built empires that crushed competitors and called it progress. But that night, at a small restaurant no one rich had ever noticed, the man everyone despised forgot something that couldn't be replaced. His wallet. And when a waitress paid his bill with the last cash she had, the man without mercy felt something he hadn't felt in years. Remorse. Subscribe now, or this might be our last meeting. Follow, comment, and share to stay connected. Don't miss out. Let's dive in. They called him the coldest man alive, ruthless, calculating, incapable of compassion. When Richard Hale entered a room, the air itself seemed to pause. Waiters stiffened. Conversations froze. He built his empire on fear and precision, and believed that made him untouchable. Tonight, he was simply here to eat. Or so he thought. Soft jazz drifted through a restaurant older than his fortune. Golden chandeliers glowed over mahogany tables and whispered wealth. Every sound was polite, rehearsed, and hollow. At table 7 sat Richard Hale. Tailored suit. Perfect tie. A man who measured worth in decimals. Across from him, 2 investors waited for his approval. He spoke without looking up. If profit doesn't hurt, it isn't profit. They laughed too loudly, desperate for his attention. He raised one eyebrow and they fell silent. Behind the bar, a young waitress named Lena Carter polished glasses. Her apron was worn, her shoes tired, but her eyes steady. The eyes of someone who had learned to see without being seen. She watched the table only long enough to know who would tip and who would not. And then she looked away, because kindness, to her, was never performance. It was survival. Richard Hale signed papers while his phone buzzed. His assistant slipped out to take a call. And with that, his wallet disappeared into the night. When the meal ended, he gestured for the check. The waiter returned, nervous. "Sir, your card?" Richard reached into his pocket. Empty. He frowned, calm but cold. "My assistant has it. Charge Hale Industries. I'll settle tomorrow." The waiter hesitated. "Company policy, sir. We can't." Before he finished, Lena's voice cut gently through the tension. "It's all right. I'll cover it." Every head turned. She stood there, small beside him, yet completely unshaken. Richard looked up, incredulous. "You'll what?" "I'll pay," she said. "You can repay later if you wish." "Do you know who I am?" She smiled faintly. A man who forgot his wallet. The jazz stopped. Even the lights seemed to listen. She pulled a thin envelope from her apron. Inside, the week's tips, $200 meant for rent. She counted them quietly. No hesitation. No drama. She handed the money to the cashier. He processed it in silence. Richard stared at her, searching for sarcasm and finding none. He felt something foreign press against his ribs. It might have been humility. He placed the signed receipt on the counter. "Keep this," he said. "Proof when I repay you." Lena tucked it back into her apron. "I already have proof," she said. "You're human." He left without another word. The heavy door closed, and the room exhaled. Behind her, a co-worker whispered, "You're insane. That was your rent." Lena only said, "At least rent doesn't go to bed hungry." Rain began outside, slow at first, then heavier. She walked home under its weight, shoes soaking through. But her steps never slowed. Because for her, the act wasn't about money. It was about memory. Years ago, she'd watched her father beg a waiter to let them keep their dignity. She was 8. The shame in his eyes never left her. So tonight, she did what no one had done for him. She paid the debt of kindness forward. Across town, Richard Hale sat in silence while his car sliced through the rain. The driver asked softly, "Sir, did she really pay for you?" Richard said nothing. In the window's reflection, he saw only his own face, and a question that money could not silence. Why? He had been called many things. Tyrant, genius, machine. But that night, as the rain drew silver lines down the glass, one word followed him home. Remorse. Rain followed Lena home that night. Not a storm, not yet. Just a patient drizzle that refused to end. The kind of rain that doesn't cleanse. It remembers. Her apartment waited in silence. Second floor. One cracked window. One flickering bulb. She set her shoes by the door and listened to them drip. On the counter lay unopened envelopes. A rent notice, a hospital bill, a reminder that kindness didn't pay interest. She boiled water. Instant noodles again. The steam fogged the same corner of the wall. Every night. Across from her, an empty chair stared back. The place where her father used to sit. He had loved diners, greasy counters, cheap coffee, the smell of hope. One night, he'd forgotten his wallet. They'd asked him to leave. The shame had settled in his chest and never left. By morning, the heart that carried it had stopped. Lena had been 8. Since then, she'd promised herself no one would feel that kind of hunger again. Not if she could stop it. The promise kept her gentle. It also kept her broke. She pushed the noodles aside and rubbed her temples. Her mother's voice echoed from memory. Be kind anyway. It sounded beautiful when her mother said it. Tonight, it sounded like exhaustion. She looked at the clock, 11:37 p.m. Same ticking rhythm she'd heard earlier at the restaurant. Somewhere across the city, the same rhythm haunted another soul. Richard Hale's penthouse was a museum of control. Chrome, glass, silence that obeyed him. He loosened his tie and stared at the skyline. Rain smeared the city lights into ghosts. In the reflection, his own face looked unfamiliar. A man who could buy the building but not a single peaceful thought. He replayed the moment, her hand sliding that envelope across the counter, the steady eyes that met his without flinching, the sentence that pierced his pride. A man who forgot his wallet. No one had spoken to him like that in years. Most people bent. She didn't. He poured whiskey, but it tasted wrong. Everything did. Down below, Lena sat by her window, a blanket over her shoulders. She scribbled in a notebook, tips owed, bills due, reasons to keep going. The list was shorter tonight, but beside it, she wrote 3 words in small, careful letters. Do good anyway. Across town, Richard typed an email to his finance director, then deleted it halfway through. He wasn't sure what he'd been trying to say. Maybe thank you. Maybe who am I becoming? Both felt equally impossible. He set the glass down untouched, and for the first time in a decade, he let silence speak louder than success. The rain deepened. 2 windows, 2 lives, 2 hearts awake for different reasons. One because she had too little, one because he finally realized how little too much could mean. And somewhere between those windows, a thread began to form. Invisible. Fragile, real. It was the sound of a conscience waking up. It was the echo of shame. Morning crept into the city like an apology. Clouds hung low, washed out silver above tired streets. For most people, it was just another Tuesday. For Richard Hale, it was the first morning in years that didn't feel under control. He woke before dawn, restless, suit pressed but spirit undone. Coffee hissed, untouched. His assistant arrived, ready with reports and numbers. Richard interrupted. Cancel the board meeting. A pause. Sir, I said cancel it. I have something else to handle. The assistant hesitated, then nodded. Because when Richard Hale changed his routine, the world adjusted. Down the street, the restaurant doors opened for breakfast prep. Lena was already there. She hadn't slept. Her eyes were soft with exhaustion but steady with purpose. She tied her apron, smoothed her hair, and whispered a quiet mantra. Be kind anyway. The first customers trickled in. Commuters, a couple on their phones, a mother with a child. She greeted each one with the same warmth. Kindness again. Not for attention, just because it was the only thing that still made sense. But kindness, when given daily, begins to ache. Every smile pulled at the same invisible wound. How long can I keep doing this? Richard's car stopped outside. He hadn't planned to come back, not officially. But curiosity, or maybe guilt, had driven him here. He sat for a moment watching through tinted glass. The way she moved between tables, calm, unhurried, invisible to the rich who hate her service. Some people spend fortunes chasing peace. Others give it away with every refill. He stepped out of the car. Rain had rinsed the city clean, but the sky still carried its weight. Inside, the maitre d' froze at his sight. Mr. Hale, welcome back. Richard nodded. Table 7. The same table. The same chandelier light spilling across polished wood. When Lena appeared beside him, her voice didn't waver. Good morning, sir. Coffee. He looked at her, trying to read a woman who refused to be a footnote. Yes, black. Her smile was brief, but real. Of course, the moment she left, 2 businessmen at a nearby table whispered. That's Hale Industries. The ruthless one, the one who fired 500 people by email. Richard heard them. He didn't flinch. He'd earned that reputation, and for the first time, he wasn't proud of it. Lena returned with the coffee. He spoke before she could turn away. You didn't have to pay last night. I know. Then why? She set the cup down gently. Because everyone deserves to eat in peace. Silence again. It was always silence with her. Gentle, but heavy, like she could hear things most people talked over. He watched her walk away. Something in his chest shifted. A small crack in the wall he'd built between profit and people. Across the room, Lena felt his gaze. She pretended not to notice, focusing on an elderly couple sharing pancakes. The man fed his wife a piece with shaking hands, and she smiled like that was enough. It reminded Lena of her parents, of everything love was before money made it conditional. Richard finished his coffee, but didn't leave. He sat there, listening to the quiet rhythm of the restaurant. For once, he wasn't calculating. He was remembering. The human heart doesn't crumble all at once. It cracks in small places first, until one act of grace finds the opening. He left a generous tip. Not cash. A small folded note. When Lena cleaned the table, she unfolded it. Inside was a simple sentence, written in his sharp, business-like script. Consider the debt repaid, unless you'd rather keep it open. She smiled, not at the arrogance of it, but at the unfamiliar sound of possibility. Days passed, but the echo stayed. Richard tried to drown it beneath meetings, numbers, and polished words. Yet every signature felt heavier than the one before. He sat through a presentation, eyes fixed on the glass walls that hid the city below. When his partner spoke about profit margins, all he heard was her voice. Everyone deserves to eat in peace. It haunted him, not because it accused him, but because it forgave him. He excused himself, left the boardroom mid-sentence. Outside, the wind carried faint sounds of street vendors, children, life beyond the tower. For the first time in years, he felt small, and it didn't scare him. Lena, meanwhile, carried on as if nothing had changed. Routine became armor. She worked double shifts, smiled through exhaustion, and counted tips that barely moved the needle. But late at night, when the restaurant emptied and the music stopped, the silence reminded her of that note. Consider the debt repaid, unless you'd rather keep it open. She'd folded it once, twice, and tucked it in her apron pocket. Sometimes she touched it unconsciously, as if the paper itself pulsed with unfinished meaning. The following week, Richard returned. No entourage, no reservation. He ordered the same coffee, the same table. When she approached, she didn't ask why. He didn't offer an excuse. Their conversations were brief, practical, but something invisible grew in the pauses. Respect, curiosity, recognition. Sometimes the bridge between guilt and grace is built by repetition. One small act, replayed until it stops hurting. He started noticing details. How she straightened cutlery with the precision of a surgeon. How she remembered who liked sugar and who didn't. How she said thank you like a prayer, not a habit. And he noticed something else. No one ever said thank you to her. That night, he returned home and sat by the window. The city glittered below, indifferent. He picked up his phone, then put it down again. What would he even say? Instead, he opened a file on his computer, staff bonuses, restaurant subsidiaries. The restaurant wasn't. His, not yet. But it could be. He scrolled through numbers. And for the first time, every figure felt like a life rather than a line item. He closed the laptop, whispering to no one. I can do better. Across town, Lena arrived home long after midnight. She dropped her keys, kicked off her shoes, and found her mother asleep on the couch, oxygen tank humming softly. She adjusted the blanket, kissed her forehead. In that quiet, the exhaustion broke. A single tear, then another. She let them fall, silently, because crying loudly might wake someone who couldn't help. On the table lay a small notebook, bills, schedules, hopes, and that same folded note. She opened it again, ran her thumb across the handwriting, and for reasons she didn't understand. She smiled. Maybe the debt wasn't money. Maybe it was something else. A bridge neither of them knew they were building. Kindness had unsettled power, and power, once shaken, began to look for purpose. That night, two hearts beat out of rhythm, but toward the same horizon. Hers searching for strength, his searching for redemption. The city slept, but somewhere between guilt and grace, a story kept breathing. Morning arrived with a pale, quiet gold, the kind that makes a city hold its breath. The rain had rinsed the streets clean, but it had done something else too. It had softened a man who thought he could not be softened. Richard Hale returned to the restaurant without an appointment, without an entourage, without the armor of importance he wore like a second skin. He walked through the door as if the door might refuse him. It didn't. Kindness seldom does. He asked for table 7. The same table. The same chandelier above, casting the same honey-colored light. He sat with his hands still, a rare stillness, like even the wristwatch understood not to measure this moment. Lena approached with coffee. Good morning, she said. Just that. No accusation. No sermon. Just the greeting of someone who had chosen grace before knowing if it would be safe. He looked up at her and realized he could not remember the last time a simple greeting had felt like permission. Good morning, he answered, and the words landed as if they were new. She poured. Steam rose. Silence settled. He reached for the cup, then paused. I left a note, he said. You did, she answered. What did you think? She considered this, the way you consider a bridge before crossing. I thought some debts don't close. They change shape. He nodded once, as if a verdict had been read and he agreed with it. Across the room, voices murmured about valuations and quarterly targets and the price of being seen. But none of it stuck to him the way it used to. Numbers finally looked like people again. He watched her work, not as a judge, not as a buyer, but as a man who had missed the miracle of ordinary dignity. The way she aligned a fork with the edge of a plate. The way she remembered a name without checking the reservation book. The way she listened when no one spoke to her. Everyone deserves to eat in peace. The sentence returned, not like an accusation now, but like a compass. He finished the coffee slowly, as if speed would be a kind of theft. When he stood to leave, he did not leave cash. He left a second note. If peace is a policy, teach me how to write it. He did not sign his last name. He didn't need to. People who intend to change do not need to shout their intentions. Lena found the note after he was gone. She touched the paper lightly, the way you touch the edge of a memory you don't want to bruise. Then she folded it once, carefully, and placed it beside the first. Day after day he returned. Not every day, not like a ritual, but often enough that the routine began to turn into a rhythm. He arrived earlier than his shadow. He left later than his pride. He asked different questions now. How many staff do you have on mornings? How do you decide who gets the heavier sections? What do you do when a guest is cruel? He didn't ask with the hungers of acquisition. He asked with the hunger of repair. Lena answered simply, we schedule by strength, not status. We trade sections if someone's having a hard day. And when a guest is cruel, we give them less room in our hearts than in their chairs. He wrote this last sentence on a napkin, not to quote, to remember. Something softened in him each time she spoke. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was respect finding its first breath after years underwater. Respect is how love learns to walk. The staff began to notice. Not his name. Names are easy. They noticed that the famous face at table 7 had started saying, thank you to the busboy. They noticed he stood to let an elderly woman pass without impatience, stitching his jaw. They noticed he did not look at his phone when people spoke, as if the person in front of him had become the only emergency. He began to eat what the kitchen ate. The staff meal. The broth tasted like patience and onions. He asked who made it. A dishwasher named Maya raised a shy hand. He asked her how long she had worked here. Long enough to know where the leaks are, she said, and smiled. He laughed, not at her, but with her, which is a different kind of laughter altogether. For the first time, he stepped beyond table 7. He followed Lena's quiet invitation into the back hall, the tight corridor where kitchen heat thickened the air and effort smelled like butter and flame. He saw the line cooks move like a prayer in motion. He saw the posted schedule, ink smudged, boxes crowded with names. He saw the tip jar with a crack down one side, taped and retaped to keep it believing in itself. How do raises work? He asked, turning to the manager. The manager adjusted his tie like a shield. We review annually, he said. We afford what we can afford. And what can you afford? The question landed without anger, only clarity. The manager recited numbers. Numbers without faces, until Lena spoke. Rosa walks 2 hours each way because she sends money to her mother. Rashid fixes the espresso machine with a spoon and faith. Maya misses lunch, so the new kid can make rent. These are the columns I look at when I do the math. Richard said nothing for a moment. Then he nodded. The nod you give a truth that finally reaches you. He returned to the dining room and sat again, alone. He did not seem lonely. He seemed accompanied by the very people he had never seen before. At the end of that morning, he left a third note. If numbers must speak, let them learn our names. Lena read it and felt something move inside her, not forward, not backward, but upward. Maybe he means it, someone whispered behind her. Maybe, she said. Hope is always a maybe before it becomes a yes. That evening, after closing, she walked home beneath a sky clear enough to show its scars. She carried bread from the kitchen, a small kindness from Maya, who insisted kindness should travel in both directions. Lena set the bread on the table beside the 2 notes, then added the third. 3 pieces of paper, 3 small bridges. Her mother slept. The oxygen machine hummed. Lena wrote in her notebook, if peace is a policy, write it where it hurts most. She didn't know what that meant yet. Sometimes the sentence comes before the courage. Across the river, Richard sat at a desk that used to make him feel tall. He opened spreadsheets and found faces floating between the cells. He saw Rosa walking. He saw Rashid with the spoon. He saw Maya stirring a pot that tasted like community. He closed the spreadsheets and opened a blank document titled, simply, Policy Peace. He didn't know what would go in it. He only knew who it would be for. The next morning, he came earlier than the early crowd. Lena was already setting napkins. They nodded to each other, the soft nod of people who have begun to tell the truth without words. Walk with me, he asked. Not outside. Through the rooms that he had never asked his opinion of them. They walked the floor together. He noticed the chair wobbled. She noticed the couple who always split their breakfast and never split their check. He noticed the light that hit table 4 just before noon, warming the teacups like a blessing. She noticed that when he listened, he put his hands in his pockets so he wouldn't interrupt. What would you change first? He asked. She did not say decor. She did not say prices. She said, the way people feel when they leave. How do you change that? One decision at a time. Whose decisions? Ours. The ones who are here when the plates are heavy and the tempers are light. He stopped and looked at her, not like a man looks at a woman, but like a student looks at a teacher who just renamed the course he thought he'd already passed. He almost smiled, then did. Teach me, he said quietly. Teach me how to spend better. Not spend more. Spend better. It takes wealth a long time to learn the difference. From that day, he sat with the schedule and asked for stories before he asked for costs. He watched the room the way a farmer watches weather, alert to what will bloom, careful with what could break. He spoke less. When he did speak, he thanked more. The staff didn't forgive him all at once. They didn't have to. Forgiveness isn't a door. It's a hallway with many lights to switch on. He switched them on steadily. A raise where a raise would change a life. A repair where a repair would restore dignity. A day off without penalty when sorrow rang the bell and asked to be let in. Somewhere in these small decisions, the city began to whisper a different story about him. Not the coldest man alive. Not yet the kindest. Something in between. The word for it was possible. He noticed Lena's hands one morning, red at the knuckles, a sting that comes from hot plates and cold weather. He brought balm without announcement. She took it without ceremony. Their fingertips almost touched. Not romance. Recognition. Respect widened. Silence grew generous instead of sharp. When she laughed at something Maya said, he felt relief for a reason he could not explain. When he laughed at something Rashid said, she noticed the sound did not echo like emptiness anymore. He walked out into the noonlight and realized he had not checked his phone once. He had not needed to. For the first time in years, he was exactly where he should be while being exactly who he could become. He left a 4th note. If peace is served here, let it be paid forward. Lena read it after lunch. She did not fold this one. She pinned it on the corkboard in the staff hall, above the schedules and the reminders and the little photo of Rose's mother, smiling from a distance. The staff gathered. No speeches, just a quiet nod moving person to person, like a small wave crossing a calm bay. That evening, as the sun lowered and the room turned the color of forgiveness, Richard stood by the door instead of at table 7. He held it open for each guest leaving. He said goodnight to a man who did not look up. He said thank you to a woman who did. He said nothing to Lena as she wiped the last table. He didn't need to. The room had already said it for him. Outside, the street smelled like the first page of a new chapter. The city did not know it yet, but a policy was being written that no board had the authority to veto. It had started with a forgotten wallet. It continued with remembered names. And it would end, if endings are what we call such things, with a man who learned how to spend his power on peace. He walked away slowly, not because he was unsure of his direction, but because he didn't want to miss the feeling of leaving the right place for the right reason. He carried no receipt. Some debts are not kept on paper. They are kept where it matters, in the hands that serve. in the hands that change. And for the first time in a very long time, Richard Hale did not feel empty when he put his hands in his pockets. He felt ready. For weeks, the change went mostly unseen, hidden beneath routine and polite silence. But change is a patient rumor. It always finds its way into the right ears. At first, it was whispers in corporate corridors. Board members noticed the missing edge in Richard Hale's tone. The man who once spoke in margins and mergers was suddenly asking about benefits, wellness, and the cafeteria meals. They thought it was a strategy, a phase, maybe a marketing stunt. But then he started canceling meetings to visit the restaurant. He called it field research. No one believed him, because power never visits the field. It owns it. Yet there he was, twice a week, drinking plain coffee, listening instead of talking. One afternoon, a journalist spotted him, handing his umbrella to a dishwasher during a downpour. The photos surfaced online. The cold man covers the rain. Comments poured in faster than the weather. Some mocked. Some marveled. A few simply wrote, maybe he's human after all. Richard didn't read the comments, but his investors did. They called, concerned. You're softening, Richard. He almost smiled. Perhaps I'm just waking up. Inside the restaurant, the staff felt the ripple. Suppliers were paid early. Repairs approved without argument. The word no had lost its usual power. Then came the evening that would change everything. It was a Friday. The dinner rush humming. Silverware clinking like nervous applause. At table 4 sat a group of venture partners. Men Richard once called friends. They laughed the way wealth laughs. Too loud. Too certain. He entered quietly. The familiar suit is now without its armor. When they saw him, they waved him over. Richard Hale. The ghost returns. He nodded politely and sat. Lena approached to take orders. One of the men looked her up and down, smirked. Careful, Lena, he said. This one doesn't tip. He makes people pay him to breathe the same air. The table erupted in laughter. Lena kept her face calm, professional. The way workers learn to be invisible in moments like this. She wrote the order, steady hands, steady eyes. Richard watched. He watched the joke fall like ash. He watched a tiny flinch she tried to hide. And something inside him, whatever frost remained, finally cracked. He spoke softly, but the entire restaurant heard. Enough. The laughter stopped. He turned to his former colleagues. When I built Hale Industries, I thought profit justified humiliation. I was wrong. They blinked, unsure whether to laugh again. He didn't let them. This woman, he said, is the reason you're sitting at a table that still believes in service. She taught me that decency is not a line item. The room held its breath. Even the jazz paused. One of the men sneered. Richard, what's gotten into you? You used to eat people like her for breakfast. He met the man's eyes. Then it's about time I changed my diet. A murmur rolled through the restaurant. Shock, then quiet admiration. He stood. If that offends you, find another place to dine, preferably one where kindness is off the menu. The men rose awkwardly, muttering. Their laughter is now cheap and small. They left without finishing their wine. Richard turned back to Lena. She hadn't moved. Her pen still hovered above the order pad, ink trembling but unspilled. He said only, I'm sorry. Not the rehearsed apology of reputation management. The simple kind. The K-I-N-D that costs pride and pays peace. She nodded once. Apology accepted, she said, then added quietly, dinner's on the house tonight. He smiled, small, real. A sunrise trying to remember how to shine. Word spread faster than the wine cooled. Within hours, the story reached every boardroom that had ever feared his name. By morning, headlines whispered, the tyrant takes a stand for a waitress. Stock analysts didn't know what to call it. PR firms called it madness, but ordinary people called it something rarer. Redemption. He didn't issue a press release. He simply returned the next day, ordered coffee, and tipped double without leaving a note. Power is loud when it breaks things, but when it chooses to heal, the world must lean in to hear. Lena cleared his table when he was gone. On the saucer, beneath the empty cup, he had left a folded slip of paper. 3 words, written in steady ink. Keep teaching me. She placed it with the others. For now. For promises disguised as notes. Outside, cameras waited. Inside, she smiled anyway. Because the world might chase spectacle. But she had seen the truth with her own eyes. The coldest man alive was learning how to be warm. The city woke up to a question. It wasn't printed on billboards or shouted on morning shows. It traveled more softly than that. It moved by text and whisper and the way a name changes temperature when it enters a room. The question was simple. Is Richard Hale different now? Screens answered in fragments. Clips replayed the moment he told powerful men to leave if kindness offended them. Photos showed him standing aside, so an elderly couple could pass. A thread of comments stretched for miles. PR stunt. Maybe he means it. People don't change. Sometimes they do. He didn't answer any of it. He went to the restaurant. He chose quiet over noise. He chose work over words. Inside, the morning felt like a held breath. Staff moved carefully, as if the room might shatter into headlines if someone laughed too loudly. Lena tied her apron and exhaled. Be kind anyway, she whispered. Then she stepped into the day. Richard was already at table 7. No audience. No entourage. Just a cup cooling in front of him and a list in his pocket that began with 3 words. Listen. Learn. Repair. Good morning, she said. Good morning, he answered. It sounded like 2 people practicing being human at the same time. He showed her the list without ceremony. It wasn't a proposal. It was an apology, trying to become a plan. Item 1, sick day policy. Item 2, schedule fairness. Item 3, staff meal quality. Item 4, training for managers on dignity. He tapped the last line. This one matters, he said. She nodded. They all do. They walked the dining room, and then the hall behind it, and then the kitchen, where heat spoke louder than management. He asked questions he had never asked, and he listened to answers he had never heard. How long does it take to get home? Who covers for whom? Where does it hurt when no one is looking? Maya wiped her hands on a towel and told him the stove stalled every 7th order. Rashid said the espresso leaks like it's grieving. Rosa spoke about shoes. How the city steals souls before it steals hope. He wrote everything down as if every syllable paid interest. Not because he was noble, because he was finally awake. Outside, reporters waited like weather. Inside, the kitchen kept time with knives and steam and the grace of people who do hard things gently. By noon, the online noise had grown teeth. An investor tweeted that Richard had lost the killer instinct. A columnist wrote a clever piece about wolves learning how to shepherd. He ignored all of it, and for the first time in his career, that felt like strategy, not surrender. He looked at Lena. I don't want this to become a spectacle. It will, she said, honest as sunlight. It already is. Then how do we protect what matters? By making it normal, she said. Kindness should bore people. He almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was true in a way truth rarely allows. They stood near the staff corkboard. The notes he'd left were still pinned there. If peace is a policy, keep teaching me. Promises disguised as paper. He added a 5th without flourish. Payday advances for emergencies. No interest. He didn't sign it. He didn't need to. The room knew his handwriting now. Lena read the line and felt something tilt inside her that wasn't quite relief, and wasn't quite fear. It was trust trying to stand up without wobbling. The lunch rush ARR. Ived and work swallowed theory. Service is the great equalizer. Everyone becomes what the moment needs. Hands carry, feet move. Hearts remember not to break where the plates can see them. Around 2 o'clock, the door opened and a different weather entered. Suits, cameras, the polished smile of a business anchor who asks questions that sound like compliments and cut like wire. Mr. Hale, she said, too bright. Our viewers want to hear from you about last night. He didn't stand. He didn't posture. He said, our staff are working. Please don't block the aisle. She tried again. Some say you're abandoning your edge. Shareholders are concerned. Are you softening? He glanced at Lena. Then he looked at the anchor. I'm correcting, he said. If that looks like softening, maybe our definitions were the problem. A camera swung toward Lena. Are you the waitress? The anchor asked. How does it feel to be the reason the city's most ruthless CEO is changing? For a fraction of a second, Lena froze. Not because she was scared of the question, but because she had spent years practicing invisibility. Visibility is a light that can burn. Richard stepped between the camera and her as if he were stepping between a wave and a shoreline. Don't make her your spectacle, he said, voice low and even. If you want a story, tell the one where the rich learn how to behave. A murmur went through the room. The anchor blinked, recalculating. Mr. Hale, the public, deserves better than a performance, he said. Now please, let people eat in peace. The cameras retreated an inch. Not because he ordered them, because the room chose him, because busboys and line cooks and quiet women with tired hands looked up and decided, for once, to believe a man with power was using it to hold a door instead of close one. The anchor smiled like a person who had lost a hand of cards and wanted you to believe it was the deck's fault. Last question, she said, keeping her voice sweet. Why here? Why this restaurant? Why this waitress? He could have said nothing. He could have said everything. He chose a sentence that would leave enough space for people to walk into it. Because this is where I met the truth, he said. And it was wearing an apron. They left, finally. The door closed behind them. The room exhaled. Work resumed, the sacred ordinary reasserting itself. Lena approached him with a glass of water and a look that asked but did not pry. You didn't have to do that, she said. He nodded. I know. Then why? Because everyone deserves to eat in peace, he answered, and this time he meant everyone. The guests, the staff, the woman with the camera, the man he used to be. A corner of her mouth lifted. Small, real, something like forgiveness checking the room for a seat. Later, when the rush was gone and chairs sighed with the relief of being empty, he asked if he could walk her to the bus stop. She almost said no. Then she remembered that trust cannot grow where caution is always the only answer. Okay, she said. They stepped into an afternoon that wore the color of second chances. Traffic hummed. A child licked an ice cream with the seriousness of an oath. Two pigeons argued about nothing and everything. He didn't talk about business. He asked about the neighborhood, the old diner her father loved, the route she takes when she wants the city to feel smaller than her hope. She told him little pieces, cautious and kind. He placed them in his pockets like the only currency he wanted to carry now. At the bus stop, she thanked him for walking with her. He thanked her for letting him. It was not romance. It was a bridge. 2 planks were laid down carefully, so heavier things could cross later without breaking. The bus arrived. Doors hissed, open like a promise trying to be kept. She stepped on, then turned back. Richard, she said. He looked up. If you're going to change, she said softly, don't do it for the cameras. Do it for the people who never get one. He nodded, and the nod went all the way through him. I will. The doors closed. The bus pulled away, full of strangers who were not strangers at all. Just people carrying their weather from one place to the next. He stood alone for a moment and realized he wasn't. The city was with him. Not cheering, not condemning. Simply watching to see if he could keep a promise no one had asked him to make. He walked back toward the restaurant, past a window whose glass had once reflected his certainty. It reflected something else now. A man learning to spend his power on peace. The afternoon light moved across the street like a quiet benediction. He lifted his face to it and did not flinch. He had work to do. Noise to ignore. Names to learn. Policies to write that tasted like bread, not slogans. Inside, the corkboard waited. A sixth note was coming. And this. One would not fit on paper. The headlines cooled, but consequences don't read the news. They arrive quietly. In boardrooms and emails that sound polite, but smell like a threat. Richard Hale's assistant placed a folder on his desk. Emergency meeting, sir. The board wants clarification on your activities. Activities. That was their word for humanity. He straightened his tie, not to impress, but to remind himself he could still stand upright. The elevator ride to the top floor felt longer than it ever had. When the doors opened, the air was trimmed with cologne and suspicion. 12 people waited around a table of glass and power. They'd once called him ruthless with admiration. Now they used the same word as a memory they regretted praising. Richard, the chairman began. We respect your philanthropic gestures, but public sympathy doesn't pay dividends. He folded his hands. Neither does cruelty. A rustle of discomfort circled the room. Another voice cut in, smooth, corporate, sharp. Our stock dipped 2% after that restaurant incident. Investors are nervous. Richard leaned forward. Then tell them to invest and something that sleeps at night. Silence. You could hear ambition choking on its own perfume. The chairman tried again. You've built an empire on consistency. Don't throw it away for a waitress. He met every pair of eyes. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm rebuilding it, without stepping on people who hold the bricks. No one applauded. They rarely do when a man stops obeying fear. He left the meeting before they could vote. And every step down the corridor sounded like a verdict he'd already accepted. That evening, he returned to the restaurant. The staff didn't ask what happened. Kindness never asks first. It simply makes room. He sat in the corner instead of table 7. Lena noticed but didn't comment. She brought coffee, the quiet kind that forgives without announcement. He looked tired, not from work, but from the weight of choosing decency over approval. How was your day? She asked. He exhaled a laugh that had forgotten how to be amused. Expensive. She didn't press. Instead, she said, integrity usually is. He smiled faintly. You sound like someone who's had to buy it more than once. Every day, she said. They shared silence, the good kind, where words step aside so respect can breathe. Across town, screens lit up with speculation. Anonymous sources claimed Richard Hale was resigning. Others said he'd lost control. But one small outlet wrote something different. Maybe this is what leadership looks like when it remembers it's human. He didn't see the article. He was too busy washing dishes beside Rashid. The staff tried to protest, but he said, if I'm going to change policy, I should know what it weighs. So he scrubbed pans until his reflection blurred. When he finished, his cuffs were soaked, and his conscience finally fit inside his skin again. Later that night, Lena found him sitting on the back step behind the kitchen. Hands still damp, sleeves rolled, eyes on the alley lights. Most people who fall from the top don't land here, she said. Most people don't deserve a soft landing, he answered. She sat beside him. The air smelled of rain and soap and possibility. Do you regret it? She asked. He thought for a long moment. And tea. I regret waiting this long to regret. She nodded. That was enough. Guilt is not the enemy of growth. It's the bruise that proves the feeling still works. They watched a stray cat slip between trash bins. A survivor, thin but graceful. He smiled. "There's your next policy," he said. She looked puzzled. "Feed the strays." "Why?" "Because if I can learn to care about a creature that owes me nothing, maybe I can finally deserve what people are giving me." Lena didn't answer. She just reached into her apron, pulled out a leftover scrap of salmon, and set it near the cat. It approached, cautious but willing. Trust in motion. Exactly like people. The next morning, the board called again. He didn't pick up. He was too busy drafting a letter, not to shareholders, but to employees. A simple memo that began, "From this day forward, Hale Industries will measure success by the number of lives improved, not the profits reported." He stared at the words. For once, they looked honest enough to send. Reputation is what the world remembers of your noise. Legacy is what remains of your silence. He hit send. The decision moved faster than fear. Downstairs, the city continued its rhythm. Trains, footsteps, stories colliding like rain on glass. Somewhere in that motion, a man who used to sell certainty finally bought a piece of peace. And across town, a waitress folded chairs at closing time, unaware that tomorrow she'd open the paper and see a headline that would change both their worlds. Morning did not break. It fractured. The first crack was a headline. Short, confident, wrong. Hale abandons shareholders for Waitress. Then came the think pieces that don't think. The threads that don't thread. Photos with arrows. Voices without faces. Someone posted a grainy picture of Richard and Lena at the bus stop. Two people standing in daylight became a scandal born in the dark. They circled her face in red. They captioned his name in gold. And they called the space between them proof. Inside the restaurant, forks sounded nervous. Even the chandeliers flickered like they didn't want to be seen. Customers whispered behind menus. A blogger at table 3 recorded everything with a phone that would later tell the world it had been there first. Lena tied her apron and said the only prayer she knew. Be kind anyway. Then she stepped into the storm that had learned how to wear perfume. Richard arrived without a coat. He had left it somewhere between reputation and relief. He nodded to the staff. He asked for coffee. His hands were steady. His eyes told the truth. This would not be easy. The manager, polished smile, careful voice, approached Lena by the service station. "Corporate called," she said, as if she were reading a weather report. "We need to protect our image." Lena kept folding napkins. "From kindness." "From rumors," the manager replied. "People are saying you're exploiting him." Lena's fingers slowed. People say many things when they afraid of the right ones. A server drifted closer. Then 2. Then 3. Rumor travels on feet before it grows wings. At table 4, the same venture partners who had laughed before returned with appetites sharpened by spite. They ordered loudly. They sent things back that weren't wrong. They pronounced her name as if it were a misprint. Richard saw it all. He didn't flinch. He did something better. He waited, because sometimes the right words need the room to reveal what the wrong ones are. By noon, the outside world had entered through the door it always uses, the one that looks like an opportunity and sounds like a question. A television crew arrived with apologies in their eyes and a script in their hands. "Just a few shots of the dining room," the producer said. "Just a quick comment." Richard shook his head. "Let people eat in peace." The producer smiled in that way doors smile before they close. "Peace isn't trending," he said, and left a microphone anyway. The manager picked up the microphone like it was a promotion. She cleared her throat. She spoke about standards, about policies, about reputation. She never said the word people. Not once. The blogger at table 3 posted a reel titled "The Waitress and the Wolf." 5 seconds later, 1,000 strangers had opinions about a life they had not lived. 10 seconds later, sponsors wanted statements. 15 seconds later, lawyers sharpened pencils dull from making numbers sound like choices. Throughout it all, Lena carried plates. She refilled the water. She thanked the rude and the kind with equal grace. She did not raise her voice. She did not lower her head. She walked like dignity knows where it's going. In the kitchen, Maya watched her with hands that wanted to help and eyes that knew when help becomes gasoline. "Hold," she whispered to herself. "Just hold." By 2 o'clock, investors had called Richard 4 times. He answered the fifth. Voices stacked on voices. "Pull back. Issue a statement. Distance yourself." He said only no. The call ended itself. Inside the dining room, the manager gathered the staff near the host stand. Her posture was a verdict. Her smile was a sentence. "Until further notice," she said, "Lena will be off the floor." We can't be seen encouraging confusion. Confusion. That's what they were calling the truth now. Rashid muttered a prayer. Maya stepped forward. "Ard. She's why this place still feels human." The manager didn't look at her. "We appreciate your passion," she said. "The way people say sit to a dog that already understands how to stand." Richard approached. Calm. Quiet. Not the calm of a storm's eye. The calm of someone who has decided not to be weather anymore. "Is there a problem?" he asked. The manager's smile lifted its mask. "Optics," she said. "We can't appear compromised. We're suspending her. Just until this passes." He looked at Lena. She looked back the way truth looks back, without fear, without permission. "It's fine," she said softly. "I've worked through worse storms." He shook his head. "No." His voice didn't rise. It deepened. "We don't suspend dignity. Not here. Not anymore." The room changed temperature. The blogger's phone tilted upward, hungry for a moment it could claim. The venture partners at table 4 leaned back, the way men lean when they think they're about to watch someone fall. Richard faced the manager. "This restaurant will never punish a worker for refusing to be humiliated," he said. "If you think otherwise, you don't understand the new policy." The manager's eyes hardened. "What policy?" "The one that starts with people." Silence opened like a curtain. Behind it stood 100 small decisions waiting to be made. The manager played her last card. "This isn't personal, Richard." He almost smiled. "It is now," he said. "Because kindness is personal. Because wages are personal. Because shame is personal. And because the person you're trying to suspend is the reason I remembered who I wanted to be." A plate clinked. A spoon settled. Somewhere a heart changed sides. The manager tried a softer blade. "Think of the brand." He nodded. "I am." Then he turned to the staff, to the busboys, to the dishwashers who sleep with tired hands and wake with tired feet. "From today," he said, "your dignity is our brand. Write that on the door. Write that on the checks. Write that on every policy we forgot to mention." The blogger swallowed. He put his phone down without posting. For once, the moment wanted to belong to the people inside it. A rumor is a fire that eats its own smoke when the room refuses to be kindling. For a few breaths, the flames lost their appetite. But storms don't surrender. They circle back. A new headline dropped like a stone into a calm river. Insider, Waitress leverages CEO. Anonymous quotes. Invented texts. A screenshot of a note from the corkboard. "Keep teaching me." Pulled loose and photographed by a hand that didn't understand what it was holding. Lena felt the wound and didn't let it bleed on anyone. She kept serving. She kept standing. But a quiet crack opened where her trust had been learning to live. Richard saw it. He did what men do when they have broken things and finally want to fix them. He walked toward the thing that needed him. Lunch is over, he said to the room. And something else is beginning. He placed a single sheet of paper on the host stand. Not a press release. A promise. Effective immediately. No staff member will be disciplined for refusing humiliation from guests, media, or management. Any rumor used to wound a worker will be treated as violence and handled as such. We serve food here. We will not serve shame. Maya exhaled. Rashid whispered amen. Rosa put her hand over her chest like the pledge of a country that hadn't been invented yet. The manager's voice arrived thin and sharp. You don't have the authority. He met her gaze. I just gave it to myself. Then he turned to Lena. You're staying, he said. Not because of me. Because of you. She nodded, but the nod was tired. Kindness can hold weight. It cannot hold the whole world. He saw that truth land on her shoulders. He made another decision. Take a break, he said softly. I'll cover your section. She almost laughed. He almost did too. Then she handed him the pad, and the room learned something it would never forget. Power looks different when it carries plates. Outside, the storm still howled. Inside, a new weather gathered. Not sunshine, not yet. Something steadier. Something that could survive the next headline without asking permission. The rumor tried once more. It failed once more. Because the room had chosen its story. And stories chosen by rooms have a way of outliving the ones chosen by noise. Night would bring another test. Morning would bring a deeper wound. But for now, for these few breathing minutes, people ate in peace. And peace, against the odds, tasted like Polly. Sai finally learning how to be human. The storm got tired of shouting. It learned how to whisper. Retaliation does not always come with fists. Sometimes it wears a handshake. Sometimes it smiles. Suppliers began to hesitate. Emails that used to answer themselves turned into small deserts. Milk arrived late. The bread arrived stale. Invoices arrived early. No one said, we're punishing you. They said, we're reviewing our partnerships. They said, we're experiencing delays. They said, we appreciate your understanding. The way a knife appreciates a soft fruit. Inside the restaurant, the espresso coughed and the fryer sighed. But the staff kept moving like a choir that knows the song even when the lights go out. Richard noticed first and said the most powerful sentence he knew. Thank you for telling me. Then he made lists. New vendors. Backups. Contingencies that tasted like stubborn hope. He called an old contact, and the line rang long enough to measure loyalty. When it finally clicked, the voice said, Richard, this is a difficult time to be aligned with you. He answered, it's a good time to be aligned with yourself. The call ended without a goodbye. Lena watched the edges fray. She recognized the shape. The quiet siege that tries to make good people spend their courage on repairs instead of kindness. She refilled the sugar. She polished glasses. She taught a new server where the extra menus live and how not to let cruel words live rent-free. At closing, she took inventory with Maya. Flour low. Oil low. Resolve fully. Will we be okay? Maya asked. Lena smiled in the direction of an answer. We already are, she said. Okay isn't what you have. It's how you carry what's missing. They laughed, not because anything was funny, but because laughter is how the heart refuses eviction. The next morning delivered new weather. A health inspection. Early. Unannounced. By the book. The way books sometimes forget who wrote them. Clipboards entered like judges. White gloves lifted lids. Thermometers searched for sins in saucepans. Richard greeted them with water and a path. Welcome, he said. Take your time. LO keep serving. No bribes. No panic. Just a room deciding not to panic with him. They passed. Not because fear tried to make a deal, but because diligence had been quietly practicing for this exact moment. The report left a faint scent of surprise. Even retaliation looks confused when it doesn't find a place to land. By lunch, another shadow arrived. A large reservation was canceled without apology. 20 seats became ghosts. The manager fidgeted with a pen that wanted to be thrown. "Should we cut staff?" she asked. Richard looked at the line cooks. "No," he said. "We'll eat together." They set 2 long tables like a family that has known both feast and famine. Rashi brewed coffee. Maya ladled soup. Rosa told a joke, so gentle it felt like a blanket. They filled the room with the one thing the rumor couldn't digest: belonging. A courier brought a letter during dessert. Legal paper. Dangerous font. It warned of potential consequences should Mr. Hale continue to blur professional boundaries. He read it once and folded it twice. "Noted," he said, and placed it under the sugar bowl where people keep the sweetness they plan to use. Lena caught the movement. She didn't ask. He didn't explain. Trust is the bridge that doesn't need traffic to prove it can hold. Afternoon slid in on quiet wheels. A couple lingered over tea long enough to confess to each other. A teenager paid for his mother with crumpled bills and triumph. A woman in a gray coat sat alone, reading the menu like a letter from an old friend. Life continued, which is the bravest thing life does. Outside, the Whisper campaign learned a new trick. It started asking for forgiveness on behalf of those who hadn't apologized. "We're sorry for the confusion," it said. "We regret the misunderstanding." As if shame were just a mispronounced word, instead of a wound someone chose. The board emailed a notice for another emergency meeting. The subject line carried the weight of impatience. Richard replied with a single line. "I'll be where the work is." He pressed send and felt the unusual freedom of saying exactly what he meant. That evening, a man in an expensive coat arrived and stood at the host's stand like a flag claiming land. He gave his name as if it were currency. He requested a table for an audience. "You must be the waitress," he told Lena, and smiled the kind of smile that makes flowers close. "I'm here to see if the rumors are true." She considered him the way a bridge considers a storm, respectfully without surrender. "The rumors say many things," she replied. "We serve dinner until 9. He leaned in. "The one I'm curious about says you changed a man like Richard Hale." She shook her head. "People change themselves," she said. "We just hand them the mirror." He did not like mirrors. He asked for a different table. Halfway through service, the lights flickered. A few surrendered. Someone hissed, "Of course," the way panic likes to feel like prophecy. Rashid moved like a man who has argued with electricity before and won. Maya lit candles. The room turned warm and old and holy. In the half-light, strangers became kinder. Voices softened as if the darkness had given them permission to listen. A child pointed at the candles. "Birthday?" he asked. "Every day," Lena said, and the mother's eyes filled in a way that made the room gentler. When the power returned, no one cheered. They smiled the way people smile when they realize the best part of a night wasn't supposed to happen. After close, Richard found a new note on the corkboard. Not his handwriting. Rosa's. It said, "When the lights went out, we still saw each other." He stood there longer than the words required. Quiet retaliation kept trying. It sent a delivery that forgot the vegetarian orders. The kitchen made a meal from what the city had left behind. It sent a blogger who asked for a private quote and then sold a public lie. They answered with receipts that told the truth in black and white. And then it sent loneliness, the kind that knocks after midnight and says, "Is this worth it?" He sat at his window and let the question sit without an answer. He didn't drink. He didn't call anyone who would cheer for the wrong reasons. He watched a streetlight flicker on and off and on again. The light chose on. He decided to. At the same hour, Lena wrote in her notebook. 2 columns. Things I can control. Things I cannot. Under the first, she wrote, "How I speak. How I serve. Whether I choose grace. Under the second, she left blank space. It felt honest. It felt roomy enough for tomorrow. Days gathered themselves. They did not improve loudly. They improved like stitches. Small, close, meant to hold. A supplier returned. "So sorry about the confusion," they said. He shook their hand. "Thank you for coming back," he answered. He did not lecture. He did not keep the wound open just to admire it. A reservation list filled without cameras. A family celebrated a birthday nobody thought would arrive. 2 nurses split a pie and the bill and their fatigue. And late one evening, when the last table was left and the mop bucket squeaked like an old song, Richard stood with Lena in the doorway. Street lamps pulled light at their feet like patient halos. No one watched. Or maybe the city did, the way cities do when they decide not to interfere. "Does it feel like we're losing?" he asked. She listened to the question long enough to hear what it was afraid of. "No," she said. "It feels like we're learning how to win without hurting anyone." He exhaled, and the breath sounded like someone setting a heavy box down. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not letting the storm decide our weather." They locked up. Keys turned with the certainty of small rituals. They walked to the corner where their paths separated into ordinary. He went left. She went right. Both carried the same thing home. A quiet strength that doesn't trend. A grace that doesn't ask permission. And a peace the rumor couldn't steal because it didn't know where to look. Night held them. Morning prepared its questions. And somewhere between those hours, the next part of their story found its breath. The city slept with one eye open. Some nights do that. They wait for someone to decide who they are. Richard Hale sat at his window, the skyline stitched in silver. On his desk lay 2 stacks of paper. On the left, a letter from the board shaped like a verdict. On the right, a draft of a policy shaped like a promise. The board's letter used clean words to do a messy thing. Restructure, interim oversight, fiduciary duty. Each line felt like a hand removing him from a life he had finally learned how to hold. The policy said something simpler. Fair wages, protected dignity, emergency relief with no interest, meals for staff and whoever walked in hungry. He lifted the board's letter. It was heavy with the weight of what most people call success. He lifted the policy. It was light with the weight of what he now called worth. He closed his eyes. It was quiet enough to hear his mother's voice from a place before all this. "Be the man you'd let sit at our table," she used to say. He opened his eyes. He knew what to do. He picked up a pen and wrote 3 lines on the board. "I will not return to the man I was. If this costs me my title, so be it. Send whatever papers you need. I'll sign the ones that make us human." He pressed send. No dramatic music. Just the gentle thunder of a life turning toward itself. Across town, a small lamp warmed a small room. Lena's mother slept with the steady breath of someone who has fought hard to keep it. Lena sat at the table with her notebook open to 2 columns. Things I can control. Things I cannot. Under the first column, she added 3 new lines. What I believe about people. When I rest. How I forgive. Under the second, she wrote 1. Whether the world understands any of it. The rumors had quieted into the kind of silence that watches from doorways. Bills still waited. Work is still asked. Kindness, as always, cost the same, and she paid the same way she always had. With presence. With patience. With a spine that bent for nothing but compassion. She flipped to a clean page and wrote a sentence she had not dared to until now. "I will not let shame write this story." The pen shook. She let it. Courage doesn't need steady hands, only honest ones. A breeze from the cracked window lifted the corner of a photo tucked beneath the notebook. Her father at a diner, laughing, a coffee cup in his hand, a future in his eyes. "Be kind anyway," her mother always said. Tonight, Lena answered softly, I am. It sounded less like obedience and more like belonging. She closed the notebook and stood. Tomorrow would ask for her. She would say yes, not because she never learned how to say no, but because this yes had become the way she stayed whole. Morning arrived undecided, half light, half cloud. Richard reached the restaurant before the first delivery. He brewed coffee clumsily. Rashid fixed the filter and handed him a cup like a knighthood. They smiled. The staff gathered with that quiet alertness restaurants wear before a day chooses its mood. Richard faced them, not like a king, like a man who had finally named his weather. I need to tell you something, he said. The board may remove me. I chose the policy anyway. He waited for fear to enter. It didn't. It stood outside and knocked politely. No one went to the door. Maya lifted her chin. We chose this place long before they chose you, she said. Rosa added, we'll still be here when paperwork forgets why it exists. Rashid folded his arms over a pride that had room for everyone in it. Make the coffee stronger, he said. Today is long. Laughter moved through the room like light finding glass. Lena wasn't there yet. She walked in a minute later, hair wet from a rain the forecast forgot. She looked around, faces ready, shoulders set, eyes bright in the way eyes get when people decide to be a team instead of a payroll. Richard met her at the host stand and said nothing. Sometimes congratulations would only shrink what you're congratulating. He handed her a single sheet. Her name was at the top. Under it, manager, community, and culture. She looked up, not with surprise, but with that careful warmth justice wears when it finally feels safe to enter. Only if you want it, he said. Only if it doesn't cost you the parts of you we came here to protect. She traced the letters once, a fingertip blessing. I'll do it, she said. But on one condition. Name it. We don't stop serving anyone who comes hungry. Not ever. He nodded. Not ever. The door opened. A man stepped in carrying a small suitcase and a large worry. I lost my job, he said to no one and everyone. Do you have anything cheap? Lena approached with a smile that did not check the menu first. We have breakfast, she said. It's on the house. He started to protest. She shook her head. Eat, she said. Pay with your future. Richard watched him take the first bite of a morning he had not expected to have. Something lifted in him that no letter from a boardroom could lower. He understood. He had not lost power. He had changed what it was for. By noon, an email arrived on his phone. Formal. Final. The board had voted. Effective immediately. They were placing him on leave pending review. They would appoint an interim to stabilize investor confidence. He read it once, twice, a third time. Not because he didn't understand, but because he did. He set the phone down. He picked up a stack of clean plates. He carried them the way a man carries proof he made the right decision. Lena noticed the phone screen lit with the subject line. She said nothing. He nodded in a way that meant it happened. She nodded back in a way that meant I know. Two acknowledgments crossing in the air like birds who don't need maps because they have sky. Do you regret it? She asked later, when the rush slowed and the room exhaled. He thought carefully. No, he said. I regret who had to suffer while I learned. She held his gaze until the apology landed where it belonged and not where it didn't. Then learn faster, she said gently. Stay. He smiled. I will. He walked to the corkboard and pinned a new note. No flourish. No signature. Just a sentence his mother might have written for him when he wasn't looking. Even without a title, keep the promise. Rosa read it aloud. People nodded like rain on a roof that knows how to hold. They went back to work. That evening, after close, he and Lena stood at the door again. The hallway smelled of lemon and long day. Somewhere outside, a bus sighed. Somewhere inside, a future stopped hiding. Tomorrow, he said, I may not be allowed in the building I built. Tomorrow, she answered. You'll still be welcome at the table you're helping set. They didn't hug. They didn't need to. Respect stood between them like a bridge with room for anything honest. He locked the door. She pocketed the keys. They turned toward their separate streets with the same step. The one you take when you have finally chosen your direction, and your direction has chosen you back. Night gathered them without asking for proof. The city went quiet in the way cities do when a chapter ends without slamming. And somewhere not far from the noise that had taught them so much, a man without a title and a woman without a shield walked toward a kind of morning only dignity knows how to make. Time passed the way healing does, quietly beneath the surface. The city's noise returned to its usual pitch, but inside one small restaurant, a different sound endured. Laughter that didn't have to prove itself. The board replaced Richard Hale with a man whose handshake was firm and forgettable. Stock rebounded. Headlines moved on. And somewhere between the new projects and the old lies, the world forgot to keep watching. Richard didn't fight to be remembered. He worked the morning shift. He came in early, mopped floors, rewired the stubborn light above table 7. Sometimes customers recognized him and whispered. He nodded, poured coffee, and let the moment pass. He was no longer a headline, he was a helper. And that suited him better than power ever had. Lena's promotion became official. Manager, community and culture. Her desk sat near the kitchen because she preferred the sound of clattering plates to the silence of offices. She started a fund, small, honest, sustainable. Each week a portion of profits went toward meals for anyone who needed one. She called it the Dignity Program. The sign above the register read simply, "No one leaves hungry. No one leaves unseen." Maya handled logistics. Rashid oversaw training. Rosa ran staff mentorship sessions every Sunday morning before opening. The restaurant turned into something larger than itself. Not a business, not a charity. A heartbeat. One gray afternoon, Richard sat outside with a notebook. The first raindrop fell exactly where a new sentence was supposed to go. He didn't move the paper. He let the rain finish the thought for him. Lena joined him with 2 cups of tea. He smiled. "You still remember how I take it." "I remember everything," she said. "That's how peace keeps its receipts." They sipped in companionable silence while the street filled with umbrellas. "Do you miss it?" she asked finally. "The empire?" "No," he said. "The noise." He looked up at the clouds. "Sometimes, but only the way a healed wound misses pain. It confuses absence for loss." She nodded. "Absence is just space for better things," she said. He laughed softly. "You'd make a good philosopher." "I make a good waitress," she replied. "It's the same job. Listen, notice, serve." Weeks folded into months. Then came the letter. Official seal. Return address, Hale Industries. Lena found it on the counter and placed it on his table. He opened it slowly. Inside was an offer. Consultant emeritus. Reinstatement optional. The board wanted his name back. The markets wanted his story. He closed the letter. He didn't need to read the numbers. Lena watched him think. "What will you do?" He smiled. "Exactly what they're afraid of. Nothing." He tore the letter once, cleanly, and dropped it in the recycling bin. Maya clapped quietly. Rashid muttered, "Amen." Rosa said, "Lunch break's over." Life went on, the way right choices often do, without ceremony. Years slid forward like a calm river. The restaurant became a landmark. People visited not for luxury, but for belonging. Students studied at corner tables. Families gathered on anniversaries. Politicians stopped by during campaigns, pretending they understood what the sign meant. Some of them learned. Lena aged gently. Kindness had found a permanent expression on her face. Richard's hair went silver at the edges. He moved slower, spoke softer, listened more. He trained managers, mentored kids from neighborhoods no one mapped. He told them, if you ever forget what leadership means, serve a meal you can't afford and see what it teaches you. The city noticed again, but this time there was no scandal to feed on. Just gratitude. Articles appeared with titles like The Restaurant That Changed Policy and Kindness as Infrastructure. No clickbait, just legacy. One evening, closing time, the lights dimmed to gold. Lena stood by table 7, the place where everything began. The receipt from that night hung framed on the wall. Edges yellowed, ink still visible. She traced the glass with a fingertip. He paid his bill, she whispered, and I paid mine. Richard joined her. Both overpaid, he said. She smiled. Maybe. But look what it bought. Through the window, they watched a line forming. Volunteers packing leftover meals for shelters. Each bag carried a small card with 5 words. Be kind. It comes back. He turned toward her. Thank you, he said. For what? For paying the bill that changed everything. She shook her head. No, Richard. For learning how to tip the world the right way. They laughed quietly, the kind of laugh. Sure, that doesn't echo, it rests. Empires fall when they forget the people who built them. But sometimes one man remembers. Sometimes one act of grace ripples through years, until strangers eat at tables built from its echo. She paid his bill with kindness. He repaid her with humanity. And somewhere between giving and receiving, both found W. Had they thought they'd lost dignity. Years later, Lena writes a letter to Richard. Dear Richard, I don't know where this letter will find you. Maybe you're somewhere quiet again. Somewhere with a cup of coffee cooling too quickly and a window that forgets to close. Maybe you're still teaching those impossible kids how to build something that doesn't break people. Or maybe you're just walking, slowly now, through a city that finally learned how to say thank you. Either way, I wanted you to know what became of the small place we started saving. The restaurant still hums like a heartbeat. Table 7 is never empty. We don't call it a restaurant anymore. We call it a refuge. People walk in heavy and leave lighter. We feed them food, yes, but mostly we feed them forgiveness. The staff changed, as all families do. Rosa retired last spring. Her laughter still echoes in the cupboards. Maya runs the kitchen now. She hung your old note beside the clock. Even without a title, keep the promise. Every new hire has to read it out loud before their first shift. Rashid built a garden behind the alley. He calls it the backdoor policy. Everything that grows there goes to the shelters on Sundays. Tomatoes, mint, humility. Sometimes reporters come back, hoping the story has grown new teeth. They leave with full bellies and empty notebooks. East doesn't sell copies, but it fills the room just fine. As for me, I still work the floor when it's busy. I still polish glasses when I need to think. And yes, I still whisper that old prayer before the doors open. Be kind anyway. It's funny how those 3 words became a structure strong enough to hold a city. You should see the faces that come through now. Students, nurses, parents, people who were once too proud or too poor to sit here. They talk to each other. They tip each other. Kindness found a way to become contagious. Imagi, any that your empire finally infected with something worth spreading. Do I miss you? Yes, in the quiet moments. The ones between the dishwasher sigh and the first laugh of the evening. You'd be proud of how little we need you. And how much of you remains anyway. I tell the new staff about you sometimes. Not the headlines, not the scandals. I tell them about the man who once asked, how do you change the way people feel when they leave? And then spent the rest of his life trying to answer it. They listen. They believe me. Because they see the answer every day. Last month, a child paid for his mother's meal with coins he'd collected from bottle caps. I told him it wasn't Eno. Ugh. He said, then I'll help wash dishes. You would have hired him on the spot. The world outside still forgets itself sometimes. Greed still dresses up as success. Cruelty still gets better lighting. But here, goodness keeps its job. Because of you. Because of that night you forgot your wallet. And remembered your heart. There's a chair by the window now. Your chair. We keep it empty on purpose so no one forgets what absence can teach. Children ask about it. We tell them, that's for whoever pays forward without asking for change. Sometimes, a stranger leaves a coin on the table before walking out. We never spend them. They sit in a jar near the register labeled proof. I suppose this letter is less a goodbye and more an inventory. I wanted you to know we kept everything that mattered and replaced everything that didn't. Your watch still ticks on the wall near the kitchen pass. It stopped once years ago and Rashid fixed it again. He said, time takes sides when people do. I think he's right. The clock in the dining room runs 5 minutes slow now. On purpose, it Remy, NDS us to stay a little longer with one another before rushing back into a world that hasn't caught up. When people ask what the secret is, I tell them it's not a secret. It's just a sequence. You give. You lose a little. You keep giving. And then one day you wake up and realize you've built something no one can take. Fame measured in quiet debts that pay themselves forward. That's what you taught me. That's what you left behind. If you ever do come back, you'll find the same smell of coffee and the same squeaky hinge on the back door. I'll be here, probably counting tips, probably reminding someone to rest, probably still believing that dignity is the best dessert we serve. And if you can't come back, if the road has taken you too far to walk through this door again, then let this letter be a receipt. Paid in full. Kindness received, kindness returned. Thank you, Richard, for proving that power can bow without breaking, that wealth can learn to feed instead of devour, that cold hearts thaw best near warm kitchens. Wherever you are tonight, may you find a table with room for everyone. May you never run out of peace, and may you never forget. The bill was never the point. It was always tea. He meal. With Grack, Lena, and somewhere miles away, a man folded a letter he would never receive, looked out a window he had finally opened, and whispered the only words that ever mattered. Be kind anyway.